Hello, friends. Welcome to another Thursday Night Live. Tonight, I'm continuing my month-long series on my introduction to card making. So if you're an experienced card maker, this is kind of going back to the basics and picking up lots of tips and tricks along the way. If you're brand new to card making, this is going to be great for you just to kind of help you get started and give you lots and lots of ideas. So tonight, this is part 3. Tonight, we are looking at 3 different ways to color stamped images. All right, it's going to be super fun. We're going to look at alcohol markers, watercolor pencils, and watercoloring with ink. So, and I'm going to make 3 cards, I hope. If you are here and joining me live, leave me a comment. Let me know that you're watching live. Let me know what your favorite way to color is. Or let me know if you've never tried it before. I'd love to know that too. So if you are watching the replay, I love that you come later and watch the replay. And I want you to let me know as well what your favorite type of coloring is. So hello, Stacy. If this is your first time here, I am Heidi with Oni Go Stamping. I'm going to help you reconnect with your inner artist by using stamps, ink, and paper to create beautiful handmade cards and gifts. I hope that if you don't already, you will subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting that little subscribe button so that you will always know when I'm going live. Hello, Janice and Janie. So nice to see y'all. All right, I'm going to make my workspace look just a little bit bigger so we can jump into this. I am going to be using the Darling Dinos tonight to show you some samples. And Jill says she prefers the blends. Ooh, that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with the Stampin' Blends. So I'm going to move some of the other stuff out of the way so we can start. I have so much on my desk tonight. It is just, it's a mess. So here's the Darling Dinos stamp set, which is definitely darling. It's so cute. I absolutely love it. And we're actually using this for the April online card class too. So the 3 cards I show tonight will be in the tutorial for the April class, as well as the 3 cards that we'll do in April. So Janice, you go between blends and colored pencils. Interesting. All right. So I'm going to start with some Stampin' Blends. I have a little tiny piece of white. We're just going to do something very small with the blends because I use blends all the time. So if you watch me a lot, you have seen me color with blends, but I don't want to leave them out. The first thing that we need to know about Stampin' Blends is that they are alcohol markers. Let me grab those. So they are alcohol markers, which means that they use an alcohol ink in them. They're going to dry fairly quickly. They come in 2 shades. So Stampin' Up's packs come in 2 packs, 2 shades of the same color. So here I have the Petunia Pop Light and the Petunia Pop Dark. When you are using Stampin' Blends, you want to make sure that you use a water-based ink like the Memento ink. So this is the Tuxedo Black Memento ink. It is water-based. It is permanent, but it's water-based. You want to make sure that you're using a water-based ink because if you are using a solvent-based ink, like we will use when we're doing watercoloring, it will actually bleed with the Stampin' Blends. So definitely want to grab the Memento to use your Stampin' Blends. So I'm going to take the top off my Memento, and I am just going to stamp the little balloon from the Darling Dino set because it's so cute. All right, so I just stamped that little balloon right there, and I like to start most of the time with the light. It really doesn't matter. It's really just a matter of personal preference, whether you like to start light and go dark, or whether you like to do just like the dark bits and then add the light. I like to start light, and when I start light, I usually just color the entire image like I am now. So I'm using the light Petunia Pop. The Stampin' Blends do have 2 tips. They have a brush tip, which is what I use most of the time. And then they have a bullet tip if you want to get some more fine lines. I usually use the brush tip. When you're using the brush tip, you want the brush point to be up against the line of your image because that's going to be the skinniest part and it's going to help you get right up next to the edge. And sometimes you can even stop before you get all the way to the edge because the Stampin' Blends will kind of bleed out a little bit into the paper. So if you're having trouble with that, try stopping before you get to the edge of the image. And I'm just going to add some dark. I'm doing kind of more on the lower left side and then less towards the top. You can see how I've done that. So I added the light and then I went in with the dark and just added it to the outside. With any sort of round shape, I like to leave kind of a center that is lighter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with the light Petunia Pop. I'm not going to go over the whole thing again. I'm just going to go over the edges and I'm going to leave a little space in the middle, because what happens when you're layering these up, once the light has dried, once the dark has dried too, if you put a second coat on, it's going to get darker. So if I don't go over that entire space that I have covered with the light, it's going to leave it even lighter. And eventually it kind of just blends out into it and I get that nice little light spot on my balloon. So there's my balloon. Let's turn this one into a card before I show you the other, the next way to color. So I'm going to grab my cut and emboss machine, my plate for it, and I'm using the dies. These have fabulous dies. Look at all those dies. And there's one for the balloon. There's one for like all the shapes, and it's just amazing. So I'm just going to put this on my balloon. And I am going to put a sticky note on this to hold it in the right spot and run it through my cut and emboss machine. Janice, you find you have more control with the pencils. Yeah, I can see that. I think with any form of coloring that you use, it's really a matter of practice. Practice, practice, practice. All right. I can get this out. We just cut out my balloon. So there it is. Now, I, through the magic of television, have already done much of this card because I didn't want to spend too long because I'm showing you all different ways to color. But here is my card. I have my little Triceratops on there. I have colored her all. She says happy birthday, and we're going to add some balloons to her. So I have 3 balloons. I made 2 before I got started. So this one is Melon Mambo. This one is Summer Splash. And then of course we have the Petunia Pop one. So we're getting all of those colors. Those are the same colors that I used on the Triceratops. The body of the Triceratops is actually soft seafoam. I wanted a really light green. All right, what am I looking for? I am looking for my linen thread. So I'm going to grab the linen thread. I'm going to pull this out. And I'm just going to cut a piece. That's probably way more than I need. I'm going to cut a piece. And now this is a little bit thick, right? For those balloons, once you get multiple strings, it just seems like a little too much. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this and we're going to pull it apart into 3 strings. It's stinky cute, isn't it? Yeah. It is a very bright color combo. All right, so we're pulling this into 3 strings. Just trying to remember from my sample card if I did not pull it apart for the bow. So we have to try the bow too. All right, so we have 3 strings that we are going to put on our balloons. And this is just going to make a really nice, like really fine string. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come on each balloon. I'm going to lay that string on there. And then I think I'm just going to attach it with a Stampin' Dimensional because I need, well, no. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure I don't get the dimensionals in the wrong spot. So we're just going to attach that with a Stampin' Dimensional. And I'm going to do that with all 3 of my balloons. Why, thank you, Stacy. Stacy says that she likes my nails and the card. All right, so all 3 of these, I'm going to add a dimensional on the back here. And this one, put it towards the bottom. And this is just holding the string in place, and then eventually it's going to hold our balloon on our card. So there we go. I got 3 on there. All right. Now I'm going to adhere these to my card very carefully. All right. And I'm going to have them come right out of the frame. So they're coming out of the frame. I'm going to put the Petunia Pop one up there. Then I'm going to add my Summer Splash right in here. All right, and then we're going to add my Melon Mamba one. We got our 3 balloons right in there, and we're going to just bring these down and we're going to adhere them to the tail of our Triceratops, because I think it's funny that she might have balloons tied to her tail because she doesn't have opposable thumbs. She can't hold them. So I'm just grabbing a mini glue dot and pulling it off with my take your pick tool, and I'm just going to put that on her tail, and I'm going to bring my 3 balloon strings right through that mini glue dot. All right, so there we go. We got our 3 balloon strings, and then I'm just going to cut the ends of them. All right, that seems plenty long enough, maybe even a little too long. I might cut them more. We'll see. And then I think I'm just going to try to take one. Let's see if I can tie a bow in this. It might be, it's too tiny. My fingers can't do that. We're going to grab another piece. Hello, Jamie Priest. And I'm just going to tie a bow. Now, I want this bow to be teeny, teeny, tiny bow. But it's okay. I can start with a big bow. All right. So I made a big bow, but I need a teeny, teeny, tiny bow. So we're going to just take this. I'm holding the center and pulling this down. Pulling the other side down. Trying to kind of untwist it as I go. Pull it down, make it teeny, 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 tiny. Now I will have a lot of extra that I'm just going to cut off. It can't be avoided when you're making a tiny bow. There's my teeny, teeny, tiny bow. Now I think I'm going to need, nope, that'll fit right on there. Perfect. I wasn't sure if I was going to need another mini glue dot, but there was enough sticking out on the sides that it's going to work perfect. I'm going to just trim off the edges of my bow, of my strings just a little bit. Maybe the edges of my strings on here too. Even more. And there we go. There is our little Triceratops saying happy birthday with her little balloons right on there. I love that. It's just so fun. So there we go. That was coloring number 1 with Stampin' Blends. So thank you, Sarah. You're saying it's so cute. Yes. I should stamp inside the dino and balloons floating up. Oh, okay. Yeah, I could. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. There is my card. All right, let's move on to method number 2 for coloring. All right, I'm going to just put some of this stuff out of the way. Just keep pushing. Now, the second method I'm going to do is using watercolor pencils. Stampin' Up! Has 2 different sets of watercolor pencils right now. There is set number 1 and then assortment number 2. Assortment number 1 is a little bit bigger than assortment number 2. They have different colors. I'm using assortment 1. I wanted to stick all with 1. This is my problem. You need both assortments. And I will tell you why. Because assortment number 1 has brown and gray and black and white. Assortment number 2 does not. So even though I really wanted to use Granny Apple Green from assortment number 2, because I love Granny Apple Green and it's nice and springy and bright, I wanted to just use 1 set. So I'm going to use Old Olive. I know. Sad. All right. I have a piece of basic white. I'm actually using basic white thick. Sometimes when I am using the watercolor pencils and blender pens, the basic white thick just holds up a little bit better. So for this, because it's not really watercoloring, and you could use Memento, but I'm going to use StazOn because it's going to work a little bit different. StazOn is an ink that works on any surface. It's going to work on plastic. It's going to work on all sorts of things, fabric, all the good stuff, right? But it is an alcohol ink. It's a solvent-based ink pad, which means you can't use it with the Stampin' Blends, but it's great for watercoloring and for using these watercolor pencils. I am using it in Saddle Brown for this card. It comes in Stampin' Up! Has it in Saddle Brown and Jet Black. So I'm using Saddle Brown for this one. And I'm going to take this little sunflower that's in the dinosaur set. And I'm going to stamp 3 little sunflowers just like that. Super quick and easy. I'm also going to grab just a little piece of white, and I'm going to just stamp the sentiment that says, "You're the best." All right, just like that. And then I can put the ink away and we can start the coloring. These are little images, so we just have to do a little bit of coloring. And I'm going to pull out, I'm going to start with the yellow. And I'm going to color in the yellow on my little sunflowers. And I'm coloring pretty hard with the yellow because I want it to be really bright and vibrant. So you can kind of get different shades with colored pencils, right? And then we're going to use a blender pen on them, and we're going to see what happens then too. But for the yellow, I am pushing fairly good and putting a lot of color on there because I want it to be nice and bright. So there we go. All three of my little sunflowers. And if you miss a little bit, it's okay, because when we take the blender pen to it, it's going to push it into the areas that you might have missed. So there is the yellow. And then I want to grab, I actually want the early espresso. And I'm going to very, very lightly color in the center of my sunflowers with the early espresso. Now here I am not pushing very hard because I don't want it to be really dark. I am going to come in and just add like kind of a darkness over here. Okay, just to add a little bit of shading in there. Let me show you. So you can see it's really messy, right? That's okay. I'm going to grab my old olive now, and my old olive, I'm just going to add a little bit of color kind of to the bottom of my leaves. And then I'm going to take my old olive and I'm going to go very, very lightly. And I'm just going to kind of shade in, color in some ground. So let me show you what that looks like. You can see I did not color in the full leaves. It all looks a little bit messy right now. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my blender pen. This is different. A blender pen is different from the Stampin' Blends. Those are not the same thing. I wish that they would have named the Stampin' Blends something different, because the blender pen existed for ages before that. And so now it gets a little bit confusing. But anyway, this is the blender pen. And this is kind of like a watercolor brush in a marker. All right. So it's going to act kind of like a watercolor brush, but it's not water. It's like glycerin and stuff that's in there. So it's not messy. It's not going to be super wet. You can watercolor with it, but it doesn't flow quite as nicely because it's not as wet. But it's really good for using with the colored pencils. So I'm going to start with my yellow first. I'm just going to go over all of the yellow, and you're not going to see a huge change in the yellow because I pushed so hard on it. I put so much color down already. But we're just going to go over that. And this is where if I missed any little spots, it's going to push it into those little spots. Get those all colored in. Just like that. And now to switch colors, I'm going to take my blender pen and I'm just going to wipe it off on my scrap paper until it's not yellow anymore. All right. And then I can come in and I'm going to color over the centers to my sunflowers. And let me show you, before I colored the last one, look at the difference that that makes. It's going to activate like the watercolorness of the colored pencils and kind of make it darker and happier. All right, so we're going to wipe out the early espresso. And I want to come in and do the old olive on my leaves. And this is going to push the old olive into the rest of the leaf. I'm trying to keep kind of like some shading in there, which is why I only colored on one part of it. And then I'm going to take my blender pen and I'm just going to go over this shading that I did at the bottom. And you can really see how that like really brightens up. So there we go. There are my three little sunflowers. And we're going to turn this one into a card too. So everything's getting turned into a card today, because I can't just not make a card, right? All right, so let's go ahead and turn this into a card. I have my sentiment. This is going to be a super easy card. I have my sentiment. I'm just going to snip off. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. I'm just going to snip this off and make it super skinny. There we go. Actually, let's take a little bit off the bottom too. And if it's not straight, it's not a big deal. There we go. All right, so this is, I don't remember what the size is on this. It is 4.5 by 3 1/4. I have another piece of white that is 4 5/8 by 3 3/8. And I'm just going to adhere it to that to start with. So this will pop right on the front. And then I want to tie another bow. Thank you, Janice. I want to tie another bow in my linen thread. And we can pull it down to the size we want. This one can be a little bit bigger. It's not going to be an itty bitty teeny tiny one like I had on my dinosaur. All right, so there we go. Oops. Just trying to unturn that, untwist it. This is going to come in right here. I'm just want to snip off the end. We're going to use a mini glue dot again. I'm going to grab a Kleenex very quickly because I sneezed. All right, I'm going to grab my mini glue dots and I'm just going to put the center of my bow in that mini glue dot and pick it up. And then pop this right on my sunflowers. I'm going to put it down just a little bit. There we go. And now I'm going to use my sentiment. I'm going to snip off the edges of my mini Stampin' Dimensionals. And we're going to pop those on here. Just want to make sure I put the right one on the right side because I want my bow kind of off towards one side. So there we go. This will go right over my little bow, just like that. And then we're going to put this on Stampin' Dimensionals and put it on our card base. And this is going to be a clean and simple card. It is going to be like all white. Sometimes I like to just white on white on white. It just is so calming and sophisticated. And all the good stuff, right? So let's pull those off. This is going to go on my basic white card base. This is basic white thick. I'm just going to fold this in half. Give it a good squish with my bone folder. And then we'll pop this right on the front there. There we go. So a completely different look. There are no dinos on here, but it's still the same stamp set. So I always like to, kind of take stamp sets that seem very pigeonholed into one thing, like those dinosaurs, and do something different with them. So here we go. This is kind of my clean and simple, sophisticated card that we used the watercolor pencils on. All right, so that was coloring method number 2. Now we can do coloring method number 3. Coloring method number 3 is going to be watercolor. So I'm going to start with a piece of the Fluid 100 watercolor paper. Let me show you what that looks like. It comes in these little packs. These are 5 by 7 inches. And yeah, and it's just watercolor paper. The watercolor paper is a lot thicker. It has tooth on it, right? So it has a texture to it. And it's going to soak up the water really nicely. Now to do watercolor, you want to use a StazOn pad, all right? You want to use that nice solvent-based ink that's going to be super permanent. So I'm using the Jet Black StazOn for this one. And I'm going to stamp my, what I think is a perhaps Brachiosaurus. I'm going to stamp him right here on my watercolor paper. And it doesn't matter where because I'm going to cut him out. My cat is meowing. All right. So then this can get put away because that's all I think. Well, no, we'll stamp the sentiment with it too. in just a minute. We're going to color our dino first, though. Can you die? Yes, you can die cut the fluid 100 paper, which is what I'm going to do in just a minute after we watercolor him. So I'm going to watercolor my little dude. I couldn't resist using the new in colors because I love them so much. Look how pretty they are. So I'm using the water painters. Now, Stampin' Up! Used to sell these water painters, and they're basically a watercolor brush with a tube down here that you can put water in. The manufacturer has stopped making them. Stampin' Up! Is out of them, so you would have to just use a watercolor brush. But I didn't feel like getting out water and having it sit on my table, and I probably would make a giant mess. So I'm still going to use my water painter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a clear block, and I'm just going to smush it onto my ink pad to get some ink on there. I'm going to do the same thing with the Darling Duckling. So this is Timid Tiger. Now I'm doing Darling Duckling. And I am going to start by adding a little bit of water. Oops, this is not the one I want to use. That one's really thick. Let's change. All right. So when I am watercoloring, I like to wet the paper first. And I want to start with just his spots. Now, the thing with watercolors is they generally will not move onto dry paper. They want to go where the water is. So I'm just going to color his little spots with just water to begin with. These are very small areas though, so. All right, and there's his little stripes. Then I'm going to take my water, I'm going to add it to the ink, and I'm going to ink up my paintbrush. Now, the drier your brush is, the more vibrant the color is going to be. So if you want to get a really vibrant color, you want to keep as little water as possible. The more water you have, the lighter the color will be. And that's how you can get some shading. So you can see I kind of added some color, and then I went back and added some more. So I can do kind of some really wet, Timid Tiger. So it's kind of light. And then I can go up and just pick up just a little bit of Timid Tiger and add some on the edges. And that's going to give it a little bit of shading in there. Do that up here too. Because the drier it is, the more vibrant it's going to be. Okay, so let's add some with water. Fair amount of water down here. We'll let it soak in, start drying up. All the way down his little tail. So cute. And then I'll come in and grab some drier, and it starts to soak in. So you can just kind of keep doing this until you get the look you want. If you want to take color out, you can add water and kind of pat it off with a paper towel or something, and that will take the water off. That will take some of the color off for you. It's not going to take the color away completely, but if you're like, wow, that's way too dark, I want it to be lighter, that will help you kind of lighten things up. All right. So I'm pretty happy with his little orange stripes. So now I'm going to switch to the Darling Duckling. If you have watched me before, I have a receiving blanket that I usually use to wipe off my water painters. I can't find it. Normally it's like on my floor, under my desk, or on the shelf. It's nowhere to be found. I have no idea where it went to. So I'm just using a clean tissue to wipe off my brush and get out that Darling Duckling, because I don't want to use that or get out the Timid Tiger because I don't want it anymore. And I have a Timid Tiger looking at me on the floor over here. I'm going to zap this with my heat tool just to dry it up a little bit. Because remember how I said the watercolor likes to move into areas that are wet. So the drier I can get his stripes, the more we're going to keep the color in the place where I want it to be. All right. Oops. A little bit too much. All right. So now there's still a little bit of orange in there, but that's okay. I'm just coloring in the other sections, wetting down my paper. I'm going to try to avoid his little toenails. I'm just wetting this down just a little bit to get started. Then I'm going to come in, we're going to add some water to the Darling Duckling, and I'm going to paint my dinosaur with that color. So I can just pick it up and add some more. Let's add some up here to his little head. And if I get into that orange, it's going to bleed out a little bit. But you know what? Orange and yellow together, they can bleed into each other. It'll be okay. It'll just look more natural. So we're just adding some Darling Duckling to my full dinosaur. And then I'm going to come back in. So this was the really wet Darling Duckling. And I'm going to come back in to my little palette here. And I'm just going to try to pick some up that's a little bit drier and add in some shading, some darker areas on my little dino. So I'm going to add some down here to the bottom. And that's what's really fun about watercoloring is you can get that shading in there, right? Got a little bit dark in there. That's okay. Just wet it down a little bit. All right. So there we go. I have the Darling Duckling. There's one more area I want to paint on my little dinosaur, and that is his toenails. You got to have painted toenails, right? So I'm just going to kind of squeeze out some of that yellow. Now, if you were just using a watercolor brush, you could just, dip it in your water and rinse it out. I'm going to grab another block because I am going to do his little toenails in strawberry slush. So there's some strawberry slush on there, which is such a pretty color too. And I'm not going to get this hardly wet at all because these little toenails like to migrate color. I'm just going to dab on. And pretty soon he looks like me when I try to use actual nail polish. All right. So I just dab that on. I do want to come in. I'm going to add a little bit of water here and pick it up just a little bit. I'm going to just add a little cheeky up here. He just needs a little cheeky. So now we can wipe my nose with my other Kleenex, not the same Kleenex, so I'd end up with ink. I'm going to take my heat tool again, and I'm just going to work on drying this up a little bit. I'm going to add a little more yellow. I kind of went overboard with his cheek. And so that was not the right paintbrush. This is why I don't normally watercolor on screen, because it takes a certain amount of messing with it and playing and trying one thing and then the other and then another. Anyway, there we go. There is our little dinosaur. My sweater matches my colors. Yes, it does. And I have plastic on my table and I totally just heated it, which I should not have done. So we're just going to try to flatten it. Flatten it back out before it cools and gets all bumpy. All right. So now these are a mess. You can just take your towel or your Kleenex or whatever, just clean these off. You can go run them under the sink. Just take off that ink. I'm just trying to get it out of the way for now. All right. We're going to cut out our little dinosaur. And I am going to use the Stampin', what am I saying? I'm using the dies to do this. So we're just going to put him on my cut and emboss machine. I'm going to grab the little die for the dino. Pop that on there. And hold it down with a sticky note. Make sure I got it in the right spot first, though. All right, there we go. And we will cut out this little dinosaur. So we'll run him through cut and emboss machine. There we go. Pull this off. And you can see that those dies cut through that watercolor paper with no problem. All right, so there's our dinosaur, all ready to go. We need to do just a little bit more stamping for this one. I need the 2 3/8 inch circle punch. I'm going to grab a piece of cardstock. And I'm just going to punch this out just like that. And I want the stamp that says roar means in dinosaur. I'm going to stamp this with my StazOn. And I kind of want to do this in the upper left corner. So there we go. Roar means I love you. Well, it's going to say, it means I love you. Right now it just says roar means in dinosaur. But I'm going to stamp I love you with strawberry slush. There we go for our little sentiment. And now we can finish off this card. Now, just like I couldn't resist using the new ink pads, I also couldn't resist using some new pattern paper. So I'm using the Celebratory Sips pattern paper. Let me show you what all of this looks like, if I can. It's gorgeous. Look at this. It has coordinating stamps too, but I'm obviously not using those. Isn't that cute? So cute. And then what I love is the other side is just some really basic patterns. We're using the pattern side. Although I really want to come back in because you could totally stamp the dinosaur like on one of these and then cut it out and it would be all colored. You wouldn't have to do any coloring. But I guess I decided that would kind of defeat the purpose tonight since we're talking about coloring. All right. I have 2 pieces. I've already cut them. I cut them and I glued them together already just so that to save a little bit of time. And I should have put it on this piece of strawberry slush, but I'm putting this on strawberry slush. I believe the size of this piece right here is 3 3/4 by 5 inch. And then this is 1 inch by 5 inch. We're just going to pop that right on there. Then I'm going to add my sentiment piece. You're going to see how quick this card comes together. Oh no, I forgot something on my sentiment piece. Well, you'll just have to see it on the other piece. All right, I'm going to think about this for a minute. Can I save the day? I can save the day. Where did my piece go that I cut out of? All right, here we go. We're going to do this. I'm just going to put this over because I don't want to accidentally stamp on my paper. It's already glued down, right? But I wanted to add some flowers that I forgot to do. So I'm going to grab my lemon lime twist. And there is this little like grassy bunch. And I'm going to stamp some of these on here. I'm just using the punched out piece as like a mask to make sure I don't get ink where I don't want it. All right, so we stamped those little tufts of grass, and now we're going to add some flowers to them in Darling Duckling in all our colors. So I'm going to start with Darling Duckling. I'm going to go from light to dark, and that way I won't have to clean my stamp. So we're going to start with some Darling Duckling flowers. I'm not going to add them to all of them, just some of them. There we go. Then I'm going to do some Timid Tiger. A few little Timid Tiger stamps. There we go. And then finally, I will do some strawberry slush ones. And I maybe need to, we'll stamp this over here. Let's get some of the ink off. There we go. Now we'll do some strawberry slush. Dennis, you're right. The ink colors do match my sweater. That's why I wear this sweater, because it's my favorite. It's all my favorite colors. So we're just adding some strawberry slush flowers in here. Really quick and easy. There we go. Now I can take that away and we have like a whole field of flowers to go underneath our dinosaur. All right, we have the sentiment on there. Now I'm going to add a little bit of Timid Tiger ribbon over the top. See, over the top of what I just stamped, but that's okay. We'll add that on there. I'm just going to adhere this on the back. Just like that. And this is going to go on some Timid Tiger cardstock for my card base. So we'll add that. And we'll add the dinosaur. All right. There we go. Just like that. And now let's put the dinosaur on with some dimensionals because everything needs dimensionals. I insist. One on his head, put a couple down here, peel the backs off, and then we can add our little dino. Just like that. Isn't that cute? He's so cute. The colors make you think of sherbet ice cream. I can totally see that. So there we go. We watercolored our dinosaur. We have all sorts of coloring happening tonight. There's our watercolor dinosaur. We, of course, have the colored pencil flowers and then the Stampin' Blends dinosaur with balloons. So 3 different ways that you can easily color your stamped images. Yeah. And there's more too. There's more ways out there. We didn't even talk about like blending brushes and ink blending and all those kinds of good things because there's so much that you can do. But I wanted to show you just kind of the basics of some different ways that you can color. They're all fun. They're all great ways. And they just they give a little bit different looks. Some people like one, some people like the other. So if you're not sure, I would give them all a try and see which one works best for you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm going to be back next week, Tuesday. We are going to do a terrific technique for Stamp With Me Tuesday. I hope that you'll plan on joining me. It will be at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be terrific. I will see you there. Have a great weekend.